Deep beneath the surface of Middle Eastern politics, a war is being fought. But you won't find it on any battlefield map. There are no formal declarations, no uniformed armies facing each other across a front line. Instead, there are assassinations in broad daylight, drone strikes in the dead of the night, and explosions inside facilities that were never supposed to exist. This is the shadow war between Iran and Israel, and it has been quietly redrawing the map of the Middle East for decades. It's a Tuesday morning in Tehran. A nuclear scientist steps into his car, starts the engine, and begins his commute. He never arrives. A magnetic bomb attached to the vehicle by a passing motorcyclist detonates with surgical precision. The Iranian government is furious. The culprit, they say, is obvious: Israel's feared intelligence agency, the Mossad. This wasn't a one off incident. Between 2010 and 2022, at least five of Iran's top nuclear scientists were killed in yearly similar operations. Each assassination sent a message that no facility, no title, and no security detail could guarantee safety. And each time Israel said nothing officially, and the silence itself became a language. So, how did two countries end up locked in a covert war that neither fully acknowledges? And why does it matter so much to the rest of the world? To understand this conflict, you have to go back to 1979. Before Iran's Islamic Revolution, Iran and Israel were actually close allies, both cultivated by the US as regional partners during the Cold War. But when Ayatollah Khomeini swept to power, he didn't just change Iran's government, he redefined its entire worldview. Israel, for its part, made a strategic calculation early on. It could not wait for a direct Iranian attack. It would have to act in the shadows constantly to prevent that ring from closing. The instrument Israel chose was not conventional warfare, it was covert action, intelligence operations, sabotage, cyber attacks, and targeted killings. The very tools that are difficult to attribute, impossible to officially protest, and highly effective at creating uncertainty inside an adversary's institutions. Iran responded in kind. Iranian intelligence began cultivating networks of proxies not just to threaten Israel militarily but to gather intelligence, conduct assassinations of Israeli citizens abroad, and carry out bombings. In 2012, simultaneous attacks on Israeli diplomatic targets occurred in New Delhi, Tbilisi, and Bangkok. Iranian operatives were later linked to all the three. For years, this was a war fought entirely below the threshold of open conflict, costly, relentless, and largely invisible to the outside world. But something shifted in the mid 2010s. Syria's civil war created a vacuum. Iran rushed in to fill it. Iranian forces, alongside Hezbollah fighters, poured into Syrian territory, not just to prop up the Assad government, but to establish permanent military infrastructure. Weapons depot, drone launch sites, forward operating bases within striking distance of the Israeli border. For Israel, this was a red line. The shadow war moved from the realm of intelligence operations into active military strikes. The Israeli Air Force began conducting hundreds of airstrikes inside Syria, targeting Iranian weapon convoys, missile factories, and military commanders. By some estimates, Israel launched over 350 strikes in Syria between 2017 and 2021 alone. Iran couldn't publicly respond to attacks it couldn't officially acknowledge per hitting its forces. So instead, it escalated through proxies, firing rockets from Lebanon, sending armed drones from Iraq, and attempting to establish missile production facilities in Syria that could be quickly replenished after each Israeli strike. The shadow war had developed its own rhythm. Israel strikes, Iran bleeds, but rebuilds. Iran threatens, Israel strikes again. Neither side wants full scale war. Both sides keep turning the dial just a little higher. Then came October 2023 and everything changed when Hamas launched its devastating attack on southern Israel, killing over 1,200 people in a single morning. The shadow war was dragged violently into the open. Israel's response was overwhelming, and Iran's network of proxies began activating in ways they never quite had before. Hezbollah in Lebanon launched near daily strikes on northern Israel. Houthi rebels in Yemen, armed and trained with Iranian support, began targeting international shipping lanes in the Red Sea. firing ballistic missiles at Israeli territory and disrupting global trade in ways that affected countries far removed from the conflict. Iraqi militia groups attacked American bases across the region. The ring of fire Iran had spent decades constructing was finally burning all at once. And then on April 1st, 2024, Israeli struck a building adjacent to the Iranian consulate in Damascus, killing two senior Iranian Revolutionary Guard commanders. It was one of the most direct and provocative Israeli strikes on Iranian personnel in the conflict's history. Iran's response was unprecedented. For the first time ever, Iran launched a direct military attack on Israeli soil, firing over 300 drones and ballistic missiles toward Israel in a single night. Israel, supported by the US, UK, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia, intercepted the overwhelming majority of them. The attack caused minimal physical damage, but the psychological and geopolitical damage was enormous. Israel retaliated days later with a strike inside Iranian territory, targeting an air defense radar near Isfahan, not far from nuclear facilities. The message was calculated and deliberate. We can reach you inside your borders when we choose. For analysts watching the region, this exchange, direct missile salvos between two sovereign states, marked a threshold crossing that many had feared for years. Even though both sides quickly moved to de escalate, a precedent had now been set. Iran and Israel had openly traded blows. The unspoken rules of the shadow war had been rewritten. The consequences are rippling across the entire region. Arab states that once quietly tolerated or even discreetly cooperated with Israeli security interests are now caught in an impossible position. Countries like Saudi Arabia, which had been moving toward normalization with Israel before October 2023, find themselves under enormous domestic pressure to distance themselves from that trajectory. The Abraham Accords, which had reshaped regional diplomacy, are under serious strain. At the same time, the Houthi campaign in the Red Sea has demonstrated something startling. Iran's proxy network has matured to the point where a militia in Yemen can bring global shipping to its knees. Insurance premiums for vessels transiting the region have spiked dramatically. Trade routes that the global economy depends on are being weaponized by actors operating thousands of miles from Israel's borders. The shadow war, in other words, is no longer contained. It has become a regional and global economic problem. The US is deeply entangled in all of this. American military assets intercepted Iranian drones during the April 2024 attack. American bases in Iraq and Syria have been hit by Iranian backed militias hundreds of times. American officials are simultaneously trying to constrain Israel's military campaign in Gaza, deter Iran from escalating further, and maintain enough regional stability to prevent a broader war. It is, by any measure, an extraordinarily difficult balancing act. And it is one that successive administrations have failed to fully resolve. So, where does this end? There are essentially three possible trajectories. In the first, the shadow war continues indefinitely, a permanent low level conflict punctuated by periodic escalations that are managed short of full scale war. In the second, one side miscalculates and the escalation spiral breaks containment entirely, triggering a regional war with catastrophic consequences. In the third, some form of diplomatic framework eventually emerges, perhaps involving Iran's nuclear program, regional security guarantees, and economic incentives that slowly reduce the temperature. Right now, option 1 appears most likely, but option 2 has never felt closer. What makes this shadow war so consequential is not just what it has already done, the assassination strikes, proxy conflicts, but what is actively preventing. It is preventing stable governance in Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, and Iraq. It is preventing regional economic integration. It is consuming diplomatic bandwidth that might otherwise go toward addressing climate, poverty, or development. Two countries, neither of which officially acknowledges fighting each other, are effectively holding an entire region hostage to their rivalry. Stuxnet was once described as a digital weapon that physically destroyed machines. The Iran Israel shadow war is something similar at a geopolitical scale. A weapon that has been quietly destroying stability, trust, and possibility across the Middle East for nearly half a century. And unlike a computer worm, no one has yet written the patch.